Linux Mint 23, codenamed Nova, is more than just another point on the long timeline of Linux Mint releases. It feels like a deliberate statement about where desktop Linux is headed, and, more importantly, who it is really for. From the moment you boot into Mint 23, there's a sense that this release was designed not simply to keep pace with modern computing trends, but to quietly redefine what a Linux desktop can be when usability, stability, and long-term thinking are treated as first-class priorities rather than afterthoughts. For years, Linux Mint has been known as the safe, comfortable choice, especially for people coming from Windows, but Nova takes that reputation and stretches it into something bolder and more forward-looking without losing the calm, familiar feel that Mint users love. At its core, Linux Mint 23 builds on a new long-term support base that brings with it a newer Linux kernel, a more modern hardware enablement stack, and updated core libraries. This means better performance on the latest CPUs, improved power management on laptops, and much stronger support for new GPUs and peripherals right out of the box. In practical terms, this release just works on hardware that would have felt awkward or partially supported in older versions. Wi-Fi chipsets that used to require manual driver installs now connect instantly. Bluetooth stability has taken a noticeable leap forward, and high-resolution displays, including ultrawides and mixed DPI multi-monitor setups, behave predictably without constant tweaking. Mint 23 doesn't shout about these improvements, but you feel them every time you use the system. The Cinnamon desktop, which remains the flagship experience of Linux Mint, has received one of its most polished updates to date. The visual design is subtly refreshed rather than dramatically changed, but those subtle changes matter. Animations are smoother and more consistent, window transitions feel lighter, and the overall interface responds faster, even on modest hardware. There's a clear focus on reducing microstutters and UI lag, something that often goes unnoticed until it's gone. Cinnamon in Nova feels cohesive, as if every part of the desktop is speaking the same visual language. Panels, applets, menus, and system dialogues all feel like parts of a single, well-designed whole, rather than a collection of components stitched together over time. One of the biggest philosophical shifts in Mint 23 is how it handles performance versus eye candy. Instead of adding flashy effects for the sake of modernity, the developers have concentrated on making the desktop feel instant and predictable. The menu opens immediately, windows snap into place without hesitation, and multitasking across multiple workspaces feels fluid. Even on older systems, Cinnamon scales gracefully, which reinforces Mint's long-standing promise that Linux doesn't have to be demanding to be powerful. For users who want more visual flair, customization options are still there, but they are no longer the default focus. The default experience is calm, fast, and efficient. Under the hood, Linux Mint 23 introduces major improvements to system management and reliability. The Update Manager has been refined to make system updates less intimidating, especially for users who are new to Linux. Updates are categorized more clearly, explanations are written in plain language, and the system does a better job of warning users when an update might affect drivers or core components. Timeshift integration has also been improved, making system snapshots feel like a natural part of everyday computing rather than a tool you only think about when something goes wrong. With Nova, restoring your system after a bad update or experiment feels almost trivial, which goes a long way toward reducing the fear that many users associate with Linux maintenance. Software management in Mint 23 continues to strike a careful balance between stability and access to modern applications. The software manager has been optimized for speed, with faster search results and clearer app descriptions. Flatpak support is more deeply integrated, giving users access to up-to-date versions of popular applications without compromising system stability. What's important here is not just that Flatpaks are supported, but how they are presented. Mint doesn't push them aggressively, nor does it hide traditional packages. Instead, it gives users context and choice, explaining when a Flatpak might be a better option and when a native package makes more sense. This respectful approach to user choice is a recurring theme throughout Nova. Another area where Linux Mint 23 quietly changes the game is security. Rather than overwhelming users with complex tools or constant warnings, Mint focuses on sensible defaults and clear explanations. Secure boot support is smoother, disk encryption during installation is more streamlined, and firewall management feels less like a chore and more like a background safety net. The system nudges users toward better security practices, without making them feel like they're doing something wrong if they don't understand every technical detail. This is crucial for wider Linux adoption, because security should empower users, not scare them away. The installer in Mint 23 has also received meaningful updates. The installation process is faster, clearer, and more forgiving than before. Disk partitioning options are explained in a way that makes sense to non-experts, and automatic configurations handle most common setups flawlessly. Whether you're installing Mint alongside Windows, replacing another Linux distro, or setting it up on a brand new drive, the process feels smooth and confidence-inspiring. The installer does a better job of detecting existing operating systems and presenting safe, logical options, which reduces the risk of accidental data loss. One of the biggest fears for new users, for Windows users considering a switch, Linux Mint 23 feels especially welcoming. The desktop layout is familiar without being a cheap imitation, keyboard shortcuts make sense, and everyday tasks like file management, printing, and connecting external devices just work. Nova refines this experience further by improving compatibility with common file systems, including NTFS and XFAT, and by offering better integration with cloud services through simple, optional tools. While Mint doesn't try to clone Windows, it understands the habits and expectations of Windows users and meets them halfway, which is exactly why it remains one of the most recommended entry points into Linux. At the same time, Mint 23 doesn't neglect experienced Linux users. Advanced settings are still accessible, configuration files remain transparent, and the system stays out of your way when you want to customize or tinker. The terminal experience benefits from updated core utilities, improved shell defaults, and better font rendering, making long command line sessions more comfortable. Developers will appreciate the newer toolchains available through official repositories and Flatpaks, allowing modern development workflows without resorting to unstable third-party sources. Mint manages to be friendly without being restrictive, which is a difficult balance that Nova handles impressively well. Hardware support in Linux Mint 23 is one of its strongest points. Thanks to a newer kernel and updated drivers, gaming performance on Linux has taken another step forward. Proprietary GPU drivers are easier to install and manage. Vulkan support is more mature, and compatibility with popular game launchers and tools continues to improve. While Mint is not marketed as a gaming distro, Nova makes it increasingly viable as a daily driver for gamers who want a stable system that doesn't get in the way. Performance tweaks and power management improvements also benefit creative professionals working with video editing, 3D modeling, and audio production. Laptop users in particular will notice how much attention Mint 23 pays to battery life and thermal management. Power profiles are more intelligent, suspend and resume are more reliable, and the system does a better job of balancing performance with efficiency. Fans spin up less aggressively during everyday tasks, and laptops feel cooler and quieter as a result. These changes might seem minor on paper, but in daily use they make a significant difference, especially for people who rely on their machines for long work sessions or travel. One of the most interesting aspects of Linux Mint 23 is how it positions itself in the broader Linux ecosystem. While many distributions chase trends like radical interface redesigns or experimental packaging systems, Mint continues to refine a proven formula. Nova doesn't try to be revolutionary in a flashy way. Instead, it's revolutionary in its restraint. By focusing on polish, predictability, and user trust, Mint 23 makes a compelling argument that the future of Linux on the desktop isn't about constant reinvention, but about maturity and confidence. The community aspect of Linux Mint also shines through in this release. Documentation is clearer, forums are active, and user feedback is visibly reflected in design decisions. Mint 23 feels like the product of listening carefully to its users over many years and applying those lessons thoughtfully. Bugs that lingered in previous releases have been addressed. Rough edges have been smoothed out, and long-standing annoyances have quietly disappeared. This sense of continuity and care builds trust, which is something many software projects struggle to maintain over time. Customization remains a strong suit in Nova, but it's handled in a way that doesn't overwhelm new users. Themes, icons, and layouts can be changed easily, yet the defaults are good enough that many users may never feel the need to touch them. This is an underrated achievement. A system that looks good and feels comfortable out of the box reduces friction and makes Linux feel less like a project and more like a finished product. Mint 23 embraces this philosophy fully. Accessibility has also seen improvements in Linux Mint 23. Better screen reader support, clearer contrast options, and more flexible font scaling make the desktop more usable for a wider range of people. These changes are not loudly advertised, but they matter deeply to users who rely on them. By continuing to invest in accessibility, Mint reinforces the idea that Linux is for everyone, not just for those with perfect vision or technical confidence. When people say that Linux Mint 23 could change Linux forever, they're not talking about a single groundbreaking feature. They're talking about the cumulative effect of hundreds of thoughtful decisions that prioritize real users over abstract ideals. Nova demonstrates that a Linux distribution can be modern without being chaotic, powerful without being intimidating, and flexible without being fragile. It sets a new standard for what a mainstream Linux desktop can feel like in 2026 and beyond. In a world where software often feels rushed, bloated, or designed to serve corporate interests rather than users, Linux Mint 23 stands out as refreshingly human. It respects your time, your hardware, and your intelligence. It doesn't demand that you relearn everything you know, nor does it lock you into rigid workflows. Instead, it gives you a stable, elegant foundation and gets out of the way, so you can focus on what you actually want to do. For newcomers, Mint 23 offers a gentle, reassuring introduction to Linux that doesn't talk down to them. For long-time Linux users, it offers a refined, dependable environment that just keeps getting better. And for the Linux ecosystem as a whole, Nova sends a clear message that progress doesn't always have to be loud or disruptive. Sometimes, the most meaningful change comes from doing the fundamentals exceptionally well, release after release. Linux Mint 23 Nova isn't about chasing trends or making headlines. It's about quietly proving that Linux on the desktop can be stable, beautiful, and genuinely enjoyable to use every single day. And in doing so, it may very well redefine what people expect from Linux, not by shouting about the future, but by calmly delivering it.